Canada is home to some of the largest reserves of critical minerals in the world. We have lithium, nickel, cobalt, copper, and rare earth elements. They're all widely available here. How Canada can become more self-sufficient in the face of an ongoing trade war with the U.S.
Nickel rarely makes headlines, yet it sits at the heart of stainless steel and many electric vehicle batteries. In 2025, as global tariffs reshaped supply chains, the metal became more than a commodity. It became leverage. Under the policies described in your provided context, the United States imposed broad tariffs in August, with rates that reached well beyond earlier baselines. Canada adjusted on multiple fronts, but one strategic question remains. If talks stall and pressure rises, could nickel become the tool Canada uses to protect its own economy while signaling strength at the negotiating table? That is the thread we follow today, and it begins with understanding Canada's real weight in this market. Canada increased nickel output from about 159,000 tons in 2023 to roughly 190,000 tons in 2024, according to figures captured in the context you provided from Natural Resources Canada and USGS. On the trade side, Canada exported about 99.6 thousand tons of primary nickel products in 2023, worth roughly 3.2 billion Canadian dollars, and the United States purchased nearly half of that volume. USGS data summarized in your context adds an important layer for the U.S. market. Across 2020 through 2023, roughly 46% of U.S. primary nickel imports came from Canada, while U.S. apparent consumption ran near 84,000 tons per year. Domestic U.S. mining exists, but it is limited in scale compared with demand. This pattern makes Canada a nearby, reliable supplier, and it places nickel alongside oil, gas, and potash as one of Canada's quiet sources of bargaining power. Leverage only matters if substitution is hard and time is short. For the United States, replacing a large share of Canadian nickel quickly would be difficult. Based on the consumption baseline of about 84,000 tons and the import share figures noted above, a sharp Canadian restriction could create an effective shortfall on the order of 30 to 40,000 tons over a full year, even after tapping alternate suppliers and scrap. The cost impact can be sketched with a transparent back-of-the-envelope method. Using the average 2024 London Metal Exchange nickel price level referenced in your context, around $17,000 per ton, total annual primary nickel expenditures would be near $1.43 billion. A supply squeeze that lifts effective prices by 20 to 30% would add roughly $290 to $430 million in direct nickel costs over a year. This is not a forecast, it is a scenario built from the numbers in the materials you provided, but it illustrates why nickel gets policymakers' attention. The first impact would show up where nickel is used most. USGS end-use shares in your context indicate that the majority of nickel demand goes into stainless steel and high-performance alloys. Those inputs feed equipment makers, industrial hardware, and consumer appliances. Margins would compress until producers could pass costs through. The second impact would touch electric vehicle supply chains that use nickel-rich chemistries. Even with the rise of lower-cost LFP batteries, many platforms still rely on nickel for higher energy density. A sustained bump in nickel costs would slow planned price reductions for some models and could delay investment decisions at the margin. None of this requires a full export ban. A partial restriction, a new export condition, or tighter logistics would likely be enough to move prices and focus minds in Washington. For Canada, the trade-off is real because the U.S. is a large and convenient buyer. For the United States, the risk is also real because Canadian nickel is not easily replaced on short notice. In a trade war defined by tariffs, this is one pressure point that both sides understand, and it explains why nickel is now part of the strategic conversation.
Actually, what Mark Carney said last week was true. He said we face the lowest effective tariff of any country. So if we can just keep it that way until we renegotiate CUSMA, I think we'll be in good shape. The key thing, and this is critical for Quebec, is to get those aluminum tariffs reduced or eliminated entirely.
When Trump's tariffs struck Canadian steel and aluminum, the shock reverberated through North America's industrial core. These metals are not marginal products. They are the foundation of Canada's modern economy, supporting auto plants in Ontario, aerospace manufacturers in Quebec, and construction projects nationwide. According to statistics, Canada exports of steel and aluminum together are valued in the tens of billions annually, directly tied to hundreds of thousands of jobs. In August, Ottawa confirmed that U.S. duties on these products remained at some of the highest levels, ranging from 35% to 50%. For Hamilton, Sault Ste. Marie, and Saguenay, those numbers represent far more than trade policy. They represent the survival of local economies built around mills and smelters that have anchored communities for generations. In response, Carney's government avoided escalating across the board. Retaliatory tariffs on most U.S. goods were lifted to keep the dialogue open, but countermeasures on steel and aluminum stayed firmly in place. Alongside that, Industry Minister Melanie Joly announced a $1 billion support package in July, designed to sustain operations, safeguard jobs, and help companies weather the uncertainty. This mix of selective defense and domestic reinforcement sent two messages. To Washington, it showed that Canada would not yield on core industries. To Canadian workers, it demonstrated that the government was prepared to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. The move also helped reassure provincial leaders in Ontario and Quebec that Ottawa was not abandoning industrial communities at the front line of the tariff battle. By investing heavily in workers, Canada demonstrated that its strategy is not just reactive, it is proactive, setting the stage for resilience in future disputes as well.
So I think there is reason to be optimistic. Canada accounts for about 70% of U.S. aluminum imports. The United States doesn't make a lot of aluminum. And so I think we could probably get those tariffs reduced.
What makes Canada's position stronger than it may appear is the underlying structure of the market. U.S. trade data shows that roughly 70% of aluminum imported into America comes from Canada, while Canadian steel remains deeply embedded in auto supply chains across the Great Lakes. These are not easy flows to replace. U.S. smelters have struggled for years due to high electricity costs, while Quebec enjoys abundant hydroelectricity that allows its aluminum industry to remain globally competitive. In steel, Canadian inputs are vital to automakers in Detroit and suppliers in Ohio. Tariffs may create headlines, but they also raise costs for American producers and consumers. In practice, the U.S. needs Canadian metals just as much as Canada needs access to the U.S. market. That mutual dependence gives Ottawa leverage every time Trump threatens new measures. It is a reminder that geography and integration, not political slogans, define the real balance of power in North America's industrial system. The clash over steel and aluminum illustrates how Canada is adapting to an era of constant tariff threats. Trump has made himself the central figure in this drama, but Canada has refused to play the role of a passive target. By holding firm on core industries, delivering direct support to workers, and keeping channels of negotiation open, Ottawa has created a balanced strategy that combines toughness with pragmatism. As the 2026 USMCA review approaches, the resilience of steel and aluminum will be a benchmark for how well Canada has managed its relationship with Washington. Trump may rely on tariffs to project power, but Canada has shown that endurance, resource advantages, and careful strategy can be just as powerful. This is not a story of capitulation. It is the story of a country proving that it can defend its backbone industries and remain an indispensable partner in North America's economic future.
Canada has a lot of cards. We have a lot of resources and a lot of trading opportunities that the Americans are very interested in.
While the Prime Minister said before leaving he wants to deepen connections with our allies here in Europe.
The trade clash between Washington and Ottawa has been unfolding for months. In February, after the White House launched emergency tariffs, Canada hit back with broad countermeasures on a wide range of U.S. goods. Earlier this month, President Donald Trump raised tariffs on Canadian non-CUSMA goods to 35%. Instead of escalating further, Ottawa made a calculated shift. Starting September 1st, counter tariffs will be removed on CUSMA-compliant goods, while steel, aluminum, and autos remain protected. This move is not retreat, it is a reset, aligning Canada with the trade rules while keeping pressure on the sectors where its leverage is strongest. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc called it proof that Canada still has many cards in hand. Electricity may seem invisible, but the numbers tell the story. In 2024, Canada exported nearly 35.7 terawatt-hours of electricity to the United States, worth about 3.1 billion Canadian dollars, according to the Canada Energy Regulator. Imports from the U.S. in the same year were smaller, about 20.9 terawatt-hours. That made Canada a clear net supplier of power across the border. Those flows are not just about dollars. They power close to 1 million American homes, concentrated in northern states where Canadian hydro is often the cheapest and cleanest option. And this comes at a time when U.S. electricity demand is projected to soar. Dominion Energy, which manages part of the grid in the Mid-Atlantic, has forecast that power demand could double over the next 15 years, largely because of data centers and artificial intelligence infrastructure. In this context, the stability of cross-border electricity links becomes even more critical. Electricity is not like oil that can be stored in barrels. It must be transmitted in real time. That means American utilities depend on Canadian reliability every single day. No tariff can change that physics. For Trump, tariffs are a tool of pressure, but in the realm of electricity, Canada holds the steady hand on the switch.
Meeting the German Chancellor is just one of a number of sit-downs planned between Prime Minister Mark Carney and leaders in Germany, Poland, and Latvia. As the trade war with the United States continues, Carney has been focused on diversifying trade, especially with Europe.
Alongside power lines, there is another sector where Canada's leverage runs deep: critical minerals. Canada supplied about 27% of U.S. uranium imports in 2023, based on U.S. Energy Information Administration data. At the same time, the U.S. cut off imports from Russia, making Canadian uranium even more indispensable for American nuclear power plants. The story does not stop at uranium. Canada is also a major producer of nickel, cobalt, and potash, all essential for electric vehicles, batteries, and agriculture. For Washington, the concern is clear. Much of the world's processing of these minerals remains in China, and reducing that dependency has been a bipartisan priority. Canada's reserves, developed under stable political conditions, are a rare alternative. Prime Minister Mark Carney's trip to Europe this week carried this message across the Atlantic. Meetings with German and Polish leaders, along with major CEOs, focused heavily on energy and minerals. Carney's pitch was straightforward. Canada is not only North America's secure supplier, it can also be Europe's. If Ottawa succeeds in building those ties, Washington risks losing the comfort of being Canada's primary customer. Trump's tariffs were meant to corner Canada, but they may end up accelerating Canada's diversification. Trump's tariffs were designed to tighten the screws, but Canada has turned them into an opportunity. By easing pressure on goods that follow CUSMA rules, Ottawa has shown fairness while keeping firm on the sectors where U.S. dependence runs deep. Electricity and minerals cannot be swapped overnight, and they give Canada a quiet but powerful hand. At the same time, Prime Minister Carney is building trade bridges with Europe, reminding Washington that Canada has options. The outcome is clear. Tariffs have not weakened Ottawa. They have highlighted strengths that Trump cannot undercut, leaving Canada better prepared for the talks ahead.